Hey everybody, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel. Today, a napkin art journal tutorial. And this one features the World Traveler's napkin that I got from NinnysNapkins.com. There's an affiliate link and discount code in the description box. So on here, I have stamped with gel medium. And now I am colorizing it with watered down paint. I just released a video where I teach this technique. This is kind of new to me. I had the idea of this, and so I create a bunch of embellishments that are somewhat embossed and somewhat distressed looking. And that's what you see appearing here because the gel medium acts as a resist. But I will put a link to that video in the iCard. So in the top right-hand corner, you see the I, click on that, and that will show you that video if you're interested in that. I hope you do. It's a fun, fun, fun technique that has so many possibilities. So I'm colorizing that. Now I'm using a baby wipe to wipe off the acrylic paint that's on top of the gel medium. And because the gel medium is acting as a resist, you can do that as much or as little as you like to get the look. Now, when I created this background, I was just doing it for the gel medium video, technique video, and I did not have a plan for what was going to come next. And then I had an idea. So again, here I added this layer because I had leftover white paint. So I grabbed this stencil. Now this stencil is actually part of a 12 by 12 stencil. This is the center part of the Rosetta stencil. And here I'm just using the curve of Mandela-like stencil to add some pattern and detail to the stencil. So again, or to the page. When you're using a stencil, you don't have to use the entirety of the stencil. You can use part of it and you can achieve different effects by selectively using one. But one of my favorite things with any of those Mandela stencils is taking advantage of that curve and putting pattern in a curve. So you've got pattern on top of pattern. I'm just applying this with a makeup sponge. The paint is not really wet on here. Less is more. You can see me replace the stencil back on top and to get a more opaque look. But you can see all the curves around there and how that just adds just some wonderful detail to the background. A little bit about the gel medium stuff. It is also dimensional. There is texture added there. So that adds another element. So again, I didn't know where this was. This background pretty much evolved. So I flipped through my napkins from NinnysNapkins.com, and I liked how the colors of this worked together. So now that I've selected my napkin, I'm going to remove the excess 2-plies, and there's usually all 2-ply layers, and I'm using a piece of masking tape, painter's tape, to help me grab that off. I'm going to save this to either stamp on or to collage with at a later date. So now I'm thinking, okay, do I want the bird looking this way or do I want the bird looking the other way? And what part of this am I going to use? Because again, I don't need to use the entirety of the napkin. I pretty much do, but that wasn't my intent when I started. I grabbed a liner brush and I'm just dipping it into water and not sopping wet, and I'm running it along the napkin to what I call water cut the napkin. I like to get as close to the image as possible. The white part of the napkin tends to go translucent once you apply matte medium, but I like it to remove as much of it as I can. And I do little sections and then pull it away, little sections and pull it away. If you're having trouble, if you touch the paper, the napkin with the liner brush, and you get a whole lot of water because the brush is too wet. You can dry it with a heat tool or wait for it to dry and then come back. If you try to pull it if you inadvertently get too much water, you will run the risk of ripping the napkin. So small sections close to the focal image. Now you can cut the napkin as well if you prefer doing that. I just find that this is, for me, easier. But try both ways and see what works best for you, because in the end, it's all about you creating. And what works for me and what I find easy or enjoyable may be different than you. So once I have this one done, I do cut out the bird facing the other way, just so I can play with the composition on the page and make the final decisions. Now you can go in and cut it, water cut it a little closer if you want. So now I'm just going to go and cut that one. Once it's cut and I've decided that I want this bird facing this way, I grab a sentiment. And I came across this saying again, creativity is intelligence having fun. And that's really how I feel when I am creating. You know, I'm using all my problem solving skills, and it's just really is just firing all my brain cells as I work on it. It just is so activating, and I think we all get something very positive when we engage that creative part of our brain. So I typed this out in, playing with some different fonts. I like this font. I like the boldness of the one where I've used for creativity and intelligence, and then I used a different font for the other one because I like that variation. So I just kind of bubble cut it so that it has this white around it, and that helps it stand out without having too much white. So now that I have the placement, I'm just marking roughly where this napkin is, or the main part of the bird. I don't want some of that pattern to show through the bird and distort the image. So you'll often see me doing this if the background is already there. So I'm just marking the main part of this bird, the toucan actually, and I'm going to come in with a coat or two of white gesso. I'm just going to push back and white out the pattern. The texture I can't do anything about. It still comes through from the gel medium application technique. And some of the pattern still shows, but it's not as prevalent. Remember, the napkin, if you're gluing it down, once it goes translucent, what's underneath it will be shown through. Later, I'm going to be stamping. I'm going to add some black details. I didn't want to do that before I glued the bird down because I didn't want that black to show through and I didn't want to have to fight to push back the black. So I give it one coat, let it dry, and I add a little bit more of the white gesso. Now that I have that all there, I'm positioning the toucan and the birds. Now, if I didn't want a bird, I could just water cut it out. I can move it to the other side of the page. With the napkins, I could take some birds from another part of that napkin, because you have 4 quadrants, remember, and add it to this part. I'm reaching under, applying a generous supply of fluid matte medium. My brush was dirty there. That's why we got some brown, so I grabbed a different brush. Generous amount of fluid matte medium. This is the Liquitex Basics brand. Put it underneath, then flip down and just very gently on top. The napkin becomes very fragile when wet. So you don't want to rub or scrub too hard because you will rip it. If that happens, well, you do have 4 quadrants, so you can replace it, but it's easier. So now I'm doing the top half. And I find doing half of it at one time and then the other half works really well for me. If I try to do the whole thing, I often get a lot of wrinkles in my decoupage. I kind of edited this a little bit. I broke this off and shortened it so it falls all on my page. And I'm just making sure there's a good coat of matte medium on top in case I want to shade later. It's going to basically turn it into a non-porous. You can see a little bit of the pattern, but not so much on the yellow part of that toucan. Now this is the Felicia Daisy stencil. And again, I'm showing you that you can use just part of it. I love the little circles in the middle. They're the right scale. I want to add black. And so I'm just adding that little part of the stencil. So, flip through your stencils. You have hidden gems inside of other stencils, and especially when you want a smaller area like this. I wanted to add the black to touch up the black that was in the focal image and to read well with the sentiments. Now, I do admit my first instinct was to grab my script stamp, but which I love and gets so much use, but I'm trying to do something different. So not always reaching for that same thing. But if you have a script stamp or another small scale stamp or stencil for the background, it would look lovely. Adding black, adding white is always a good addition to a page. It gives you that contrast, that something that just pushes it over edge. Here I'm using the black acrylic paint on a makeup sponge and I'm edging the page. I want to get that black around it. Again, that's going to work together with the black that's on the page. And you can see as soon as you start this, it's like it comes into focus. NinnysNapkins also carries the TCW stencils, as well as many of the art journaling supplies that you see me using in all my videos. And if there's a brand there or something that you want that she doesn't have, she's always very open to being able to get the supplies that her customers want. So just give her an email. I'm just deciding on the final placement. And in the end, intelligence kind of gets a little off skew, a little crooked. It happens. There's been some discussion in my Facebook group recently about, what do you do first? Do you do the focal image or you do the background? And really, you can do it in any order. You have to pay attention to what kind of mediums you're using. If something is water activated, I tend to use it more at the end, or you have to do it differently because you don't want it to reactivate. I could have put the focal image down here and painted the background around it. And I've done that in some videos on some pages. So, we have a lot of options. I will be doing a recap at the end of this video with my technique cards, just to summarize all the steps. That's something that people have told me they like, so I try to do it whenever I can. Now I'm doing some shading, and I've chosen to use my General's charcoal pencil. And I'm going around on the outside. I use the medium one on the inside because I don't want it to smudge as much, and I'm using this extra soft on the outside where I'm using my finger to smudge it a bit. I opted to not give this a wash of color. Sometimes I do that with napkin to brighten the colors, but I was quite happy with the colors that still were there. I just wanted to add a little bit of line work, a little bit of shading. Now the napkin is textured, so when you're using the General's charcoal pencil on top of the napkin, don't press too hard, and even be more importantly, make sure that it's completely dry beforehand. If you don't wait for it to dry or you press too hard, you're liable to rip the napkin, and that will not make you happy. I'm looking at this toucan right now and I'm thinking I'm going to maybe do another page, and I'm going to cut off all the other birds. Now where you see the birds kind of taking a bite out that are sitting on the beak, I'm thinking I'm going to try to, once I cut that out, paint that back in. We'll see how I do. So stay tuned. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe and then click on the bell to select to be notified of upcoming videos. Now, I think I've been told that you won't be notified if you sign out of YouTube. If you stay signed in, then you will continue to get the notifications. I know there's been some problem with that, so hopefully that helps. If you don't have a charcoal or General's charcoal pencil, you can use a woodless charcoal pencil the same way, or you can use some micron pens. I just wanted to add some of that charcoal pencil around the edge, and it gives that smudged look that gives a very different look than the edging with the makeup sponge and acrylic paint. I've also used my corner punch to make the rounded corners on my pages. This book is an old recipe binder. This page is from an old recipe binder that I got at a thrift store. Great size, great way to repurpose and reuse something that I think we all have lying around, and I'll be looking for another one. I'm just going to use my Sakura glaze pen to outline the two words here, just with black, so it ties it all in and kind of gives it a frame. And yes, you can remove it with the baby wipe very quickly before it dries if you make a mistake like I just did. I love how this page turned out. It's bothering me that intelligence is kind of not lined up perfectly. I'm dotting the eyes with the Sakura glaze pen because it will be shiny and glossy, and I think that's just going to add another little detail. Loving the page. I hope you love it too. So, to recap, this started out with stamping with gel medium. Then I used the block and blend way of adding colors with blues, greens, and yellows. I used one part of that Mandela stencil to make circular patterns. Then I chose a napkin for the focal image that used some of the same colors that I had in the background. I selected my sentiment. Once I glued down the napkin, did some more stenciling. Again, just a portion of a larger stencil. I used the charcoal pencil to shade the image, and then I edged my page. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Now go have some fun and get creative.